October 15, 1975. Shepperton Studios, London. Soundstage 7. Gregory Peck stood in a mock-up cathedral, holding a gleaming dagger above a sleeping child. At 59, Hollywood's moral conscience was about to do something unthinkable. He was about to kill a little boy on camera. The child actor playing Damien Thorne lay motionless on the altar, innocent in sleep. Around them, dozens of crew members watched in silence as America's most principled hero prepared to commit the most unprincipled act imaginable. "Action," called director Richard Donner. Gregory raised the dagger, his face contorting with anguish. The man who had played Atticus Finch, the perfect father who protected children from the world's cruelty, was now playing a father who had to destroy his own child to save the world. Wait. Because what happened over the next 18 months would create the most shocking role reversal in cinema history. The moral transformation that left audiences wondering if they were watching the same actor who had embodied justice, dignity, and paternal love just 13 years earlier. This is the story of how America's conscience agreed to play the Antichrist's father. How the man who defended the innocent became the man who had to destroy innocence itself. The role that almost broke Gregory Peck's soul and revealed the terrifying price of moral complexity. March 25, 1963. Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, Los Angeles. The winner for Best Actor, Gregory Peck for To Kill a Mockingbird. Gregory walked to the stage to accept the golden statue for playing Atticus Finch. In his hands, he held recognition for portraying the perfect father, the man who stood between his children and the world's hatred, the lawyer who risked everything to defend an innocent black man. "This belongs to Harper Lee," Gregory said, his voice carrying across the auditorium to millions watching at home. "Her insight has given all of us the opportunity to experience something meaningful." What Gregory didn't know was that 12 years later, he would be offered a role that would test everything Atticus Finch represented. A father who would face a choice that no moral framework could resolve. Kill your child, or watch the world burn. The Academy Award. In his hands represented the pinnacle of principled heroism. Atticus Finch was the father every child deserved. Patient, protective, willing to sacrifice his reputation to do what was right. But in 1975, Gregory would discover that moral courage becomes infinitely more complex when the innocent child you're supposed to protect is the source of ultimate evil. Have you ever stood at the peak of one achievement, not knowing that your next challenge would demand everything you thought you believed? Held success in your hands while destiny prepared a test that would redefine everything? The Oscar for Atticus Finch was more than recognition for great acting. It was a promise that Gregory Peck would forever be associated with moral clarity, paternal wisdom, and the triumph of good over evil. The promise that the Omen would brutally, systematically destroy. Spring 1975, Beverly Hills, Gregory Peck's study. Gregory sat behind his mahogany desk, reading a script that made his stomach turn. Page after page of a father slowly discovering that his beloved 5-year-old son was the prophesied Antichrist. Robert Thorne, American diplomat, loving husband, devoted father. A man who would have to choose between paternal love and global salvation. The script's climax was unambiguous. Robert Thorne raising 7 blessed daggers to kill the child he had raised as his own son. "I can't play this," Gregory told his agent during their phone call. Atticus Finch doesn't kill children. Gregory Peck doesn't kill children. But producer Harvey Bernhard had approached the role differently. This isn't about killing a child, he explained. This is about a father discovering that love and duty can be incompatible. That sometimes moral courage requires the most immoral act imaginable. Gregory hung up the phone and stared at the script. Everything Atticus Finch represented, protection of innocence, unwavering principles, paternal love, would be inverted in the Omen. The man who had fought a racist system to protect Tom Robinson would now fight supernatural evil to protect humanity. But the cost would be the life of his own child. Have you ever been offered something that challenged every principle you'd built your identity around? Faced a choice that would force you to betray everything people expected from you? For 3 weeks, Gregory wrestled with the decision. Take the role and risk destroying the moral authority that had defined his career. Refuse it and miss the chance to explore the darkest corners of paternal responsibility. The script remained on his desk, pages growing worn from repeated readings, as Gregory Peck prepared to make the most controversial decision of his career. Summer 1975. Warner Brothers Executive Boardroom. Absolutely not, the studio executive said, sliding the script back across the conference table. We will not make America's moral conscience a child killer. Our audience won't accept it. Warner Brothers had envisioned Oliver Reed in the role, a rougher actor, someone who looked capable of violence without destroying audience sympathies. Producer Harvey Bernhard tried a different approach. That's exactly why it has to be Gregory Peck. The moral weight of the role requires someone audiences trust completely. When Gregory Peck raises that dagger, people will understand this isn't about cruelty. It's about sacrifice. The executives remained unconvinced. Gregory Peck was Atticus Finch. He was the man who represented American values. Casting him as someone who kills a child would be box office suicide. William Holden had already turned down the role, telling his agent, "I don't want to star in a film about the devil." Charlton Heston had been offered the part on July 19, 1975. He declined on July 27th, concerned about the film's potentially exploitative nature. Dick Van Dyke had refused because of the violence and gore, later calling the decision stupid. Have you ever watched an entire industry reject an idea because it challenged too many assumptions? Seen creativity blocked by fear of audience reaction? One by one, major stars had walked away from The Omen. Not because the script was bad, but because playing Robert Thorne required audiences to accept their heroes in morally ambiguous situations. Only Alan Ladd Jr. at 20th Century Fox was willing to take the risk. He understood that sometimes the most powerful stories emerged from forcing beloved actors into impossible moral positions. The casting of Gregory Peck wasn't just about finding the right actor. It was about asking audiences to confront the possibility that even their most trusted moral authorities might face choices that had no right answers. August 1975. Gregory's Beverly Hills home, late evening. Gregory sat in his study, surrounded by the contradictory symbols of his career. The Academy Award for Atticus Finch gleamed on the shelf. The Omen script lay open on his desk to the climactic scene where Robert Thorne prepares to kill Damien. "In the name of God, do your duty," Robert Thorne says in the script before attempting to drive the dagger into his son's heart. The line echoed Atticus Finch's closing argument. "In the name of God, Do your duty. But where Atticus urged a jury to save an innocent man, Robert Thorne was preparing to kill an innocent-looking child. Gregory's wife, Veronique, found him there at midnight, still wrestling with the decision. "What troubles you about this role?" she asked. "Everything Atticus Finch represented? Protection of children, moral clarity, doing what's right regardless of cost. This role inverts all of it. Robert Thorne loves his son completely, but has to destroy him to save humanity." Gregory understood that accepting the Omen would force audiences to reconcile their image of him with this new moral complexity. Could the same man who played the perfect father convincingly play a father forced to kill his child? The deeper question haunted him. Was he strong enough as an actor to make Robert Thorne's actions feel morally justified rather than monstrous? Have you ever faced a decision that would require you to act against everything people expected from your character? Wondered whether you were capable of convincing others that your contradictory actions were necessary? Gregory spent hours reading theological texts about good and evil, duty and love, sacrifice and salvation. The role demanded that he find truth in moral paradox. By September 1975, he had made his decision. He would play Robert Thorne, not despite being Atticus Finch, but because being Atticus Finch gave him the moral authority to make Robert Thorne's actions believable. October 6th, 1975. Shepperton Studios, London. First day of principal photography. Gregory arrived on set wearing the same careful dignity that had characterized his entire career. But today, that dignity would be challenged in ways he had never experienced. The first scene scheduled was Robert Thorne's discovery of the 666 birthmark on Damien's scalp. The moment when a loving father realizes his child is literally the spawn of Satan. Young Harvey Stevens lay sleeping in the makeshift bed, his blonde hair dyed black for the role. At 4 years old, he had no understanding of the supernatural horror his character represented. Gregory approached the sleeping child exactly as Atticus Finch might approach Scout or Jem, with tenderness, with protective instincts. Then the cameras rolled, and he had to transform that paternal love into dawning horror. "He's beautiful," Gregory murmured, staying in character as Robert Thorne. His fingers traced through Damien's hair, searching for the birthmark that would confirm his worst fears. When the makeup department revealed the artificial 666 birthmark, Gregory's reaction was genuine. For a split second, he wasn't acting. He was a father discovering that everything he loved about his child was a lie. "Cut!" called director Richard Donner. "Perfect. That horror on your face was exactly what we needed." Gregory stepped back from the bed, shaken. "It felt too real," he told Donner quietly. "For a moment, I forgot this was acting." Have you ever performed a role that demanded you access emotions you weren't sure you wanted to explore? Found that pretending to do terrible things felt more disturbing than you'd expected? The first day of filming established the emotional template for the entire production. Gregory would have to find new depths of moral conflict, paternal anguish, and reluctant determination. Atticus Finch had never prepared him for this. November 1975. Production continued with increasing emotional intensity. Every day brought new scenes that challenged Gregory's comfort with the material. Mrs. Baylock throwing Catherine Thorne from a hospital window. Keith Jennings being decapitated by a sheet of glass. Father Brennan impaled by a falling church spire. Gregory had initially been concerned about the death scenes, worried they would be exploitative and gratuitously violent. But as filming progressed, he discovered something unexpected. The violence served the moral complexity of the story. "Each death feels like cosmic justice," Gregory observed during a break between takes. "These aren't random horror movie kills. They're consequences of interfering with prophecy." Director Richard Donner had crafted the deaths with restraint. No excessive gore, no lingering shots of suffering. Just sudden, shocking reminders that Robert Thorne was fighting forces beyond human understanding. But the scene that truly tested Gregory came in late November. Robert Thorne discovering the jackal carcass and child skeleton in the cemetery. The moment when he realizes his biological son was murdered so Damien could take his place. Standing in the fake cemetery, holding the tiny skull of his murdered child, Gregory felt the full weight of Robert Thorne's moral crisis. "Your real son was killed so the Antichrist could be raised as your own," Donner explained during rehearsal. "You loved Damien completely, not knowing he was responsible for your biological child's death." Gregory cradled the prop skull with trembling hands. How does a father process that knowledge? How do you continue loving a child after learning he's the reason your real child is dead? Have you ever tried to imagine loving someone completely, then discovering they were responsible for destroying everything you held dear, felt the impossible tension between love and justice? The cemetery scene forced Gregory to access grief, rage, and protective instincts simultaneously. He had to mourn the child he'd never known, while preparing to destroy the child he couldn't stop loving. January 9th, 1976. Final week of production, the cathedral scene. After 11 weeks of filming, Gregory faced the moment that would define Robert Thorne's character and his own performance: attempting to kill Damien in the cathedral. The scene required Gregory to drag a screaming child onto an altar, raise blessed daggers, and prepare to drive them into the boy's heart. Everything about the sequence violated every paternal instinct Gregory had developed over 6 decades of life. "I need to understand Robert's psychology in this moment," Gregory told Donner before filming began. "What allows a loving father to attempt killing his child?" Donner's response was immediate. "Robert isn't Thorne longer choosing between love and duty. He's choosing between one child's life and humanity's survival. It's not about cruelty. It's about accepting the most terrible responsibility imaginable." When cameras rolled, Gregory's performance accessed emotions he had never explored as an actor. The anguish of a man betraying every protective instinct he possessed. The determination of someone who understood that love sometimes requires the most unloving act possible. "In the name of God, forgive me," Robert Thorne whispers, before raising the daggers. The line paralleled Atticus Finch's "In the name of God, do your duty." But where Atticus sought justice, Robert sought sacrifice. Where Atticus protected innocence, Robert prepared to destroy it. Gregory's performance in the cathedral scene became a masterclass in moral complexity. Audiences watched Atticus Finch become capable of filicide, not through corruption, but through love so profound that it transcended conventional morality. Have you ever watched someone you trusted completely do something that challenged everything you believed about their character? Realize that moral people sometimes face choices that have no purely good options? When the police arrived to shoot Robert Thorne, Gregory's final expression conveyed not defeat, but relief. A father who had accepted the most terrible duty imaginable. knowing that his sacrifice would save humanity from his beloved child. February 1976. Post-production and early screenings. The first test audience reactions were unprecedented. People emerged from theaters visibly shaken, not by the horror elements, but by watching Gregory Peck attempt to kill a child. "I've never seen anything like this," reported one focus group coordinator. "They're not scared of the supernatural aspects. They're disturbed by seeing Atticus Finch become capable of infanticide." Gregory attended several early screenings, watching audience reactions with fascination and concern. People who had cheered his Oscar win 13 years earlier now sat in stunned silence as he raised daggers above a sleeping child. "This role has forced me to explore aspects of fatherhood I never wanted to consider," Gregory reflected during interviews. "What do you do when love and duty become incompatible? When protecting some children requires sacrificing others?" The critical response was divided. Some reviewers praised Gregory's willingness to challenge audience expectations. Others accused him of betraying the moral authority that had defined his career. But Gregory understood something the critics missed. Robert Thorne wasn't the opposite of Atticus Finch. He was Atticus Finch facing an impossible moral choice. Both characters embodied paternal love. Both accepted terrible responsibilities to protect innocence. The difference was that Atticus fought to save one innocent man from unjust death. Robert fought to prevent one innocent-looking child from causing universal destruction. Have you ever realized that your most controversial decisions actually expressed your deepest values? That doing something that looked wrong was the only way to serve what you believed was right? The Omen forced audiences to confront moral complexity they had never considered. Could good parents be capable of harming their children? Could love itself become a form of sacrifice that demanded the ultimate price? June 25, 1976. The Omen opened in 516 theaters across America. The film grossed $4.3 million in its opening weekend, a record for 20th Century Fox. Audiences who had initially been disturbed by Gregory's casting were now driving the film toward becoming the sixth highest grossing movie of 1976. Total gross: $60.9 million from a $2.8 million budget. The commercial success vindicated Gregory's controversial choice. Audiences hadn't rejected Gregory Peck playing a child killer. They had embraced the moral complexity he brought to the role. "People understand that Robert Thorne isn't evil," Gregory observed during the film's publicity tour. "He's a good man forced to contemplate an evil act for good reasons." That moral paradox resonates with audiences because we all face smaller versions of these impossible choices. The film's success also proved something important about Gregory's acting range. For 30 years, he had been typecast as moral heroes. The Omen demonstrated that his principled screen persona could support moral ambiguity without collapsing into inconsistency. Critics who had initially dismissed the casting began recognizing Gregory's achievement. He had made Robert Thorne's actions feel morally justified without losing the audience's sympathy. The key was understanding that both Atticus Finch and Robert Thorne represented paternal love in extreme circumstances. Atticus protected his children from societal hatred. Robert protected humanity from supernatural evil. Have you ever succeeded at something people predicted would fail? Discovered that taking an unpopular risk actually revealed new strengths you didn't know you possessed? The Omen's box office success proved that audiences were hungry for moral complexity. They didn't want their heroes to be simple. They wanted them to be tested by choices that revealed the true depth of their principles. Gregory Peck, playing the Antichrist's father, wasn't a betrayal of Atticus Finch. It was the ultimate expression of what Atticus Finch represented. A man willing to sacrifice everything, even his own moral comfort, to protect innocence. Summer 1976. The Catholic Church versus Protestant praise. The Omen created an unprecedented religious controversy. The Catholic Church condemned the film for misrepresenting Christian eschatology and promoting dispensationalist theology that mainstream Christianity rejected. But Protestant evangelical groups praised the movie, with the California Graduate School of Theology presenting the filmmakers with a special award during their 1977 commencement ceremonies. Gregory found himself caught between theological factions, his performance interpreted differently by various religious communities. "I didn't set out to make a religious statement," Gregory explained during interviews. "I was exploring what happens when a good father faces an impossible choice. The supernatural elements serve the human drama." But audiences saw deeper meanings. Robert Thorne's willingness to kill his beloved child to save humanity paralleled Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac at God's command. Both stories explored the terrible price of absolute faith. The film's most profound religious impact was making the number 666 part of popular culture. Before The Omen, most Americans weren't familiar with the mark of the beast from Revelation. The movie introduced dispensationalist theology to mainstream audiences. Gregory's portrayal of Robert Thorne gave theological concepts emotional weight. Abstract ideas about good, evil, sacrifice, and salvation became embodied in a father's anguish over his beloved child. The film asks whether we would have the courage to do what Abraham was prepared to do, one theologian observed. Gregory Peck makes that question feel urgent rather than academic. Have you ever created something that sparked debates you never intended to start? Found that your personal choices became symbols for larger cultural conflicts? The religious controversies surrounding The Omen proved that Gregory had achieved something rare. A performance that transcended entertainment to become a vehicle for exploring fundamental questions about faith, morality, and sacrifice. 1977 award season. The Omen received 2 Oscar nominations: Best Original Score for Jerry Goldsmith, which won, and Best Original Song. Gregory didn't receive an acting nomination, but he won the Saturn Award for Best Actor in a Horror Film, his only horror genre recognition. The Saturn Award represented something significant. Acknowledgement that Gregory had successfully crossed into a new genre without losing his essential screen persona. Playing Robert Thorne required everything I learned from playing Atticus Finch, Gregory reflected during his acceptance speech. Both characters represent fathers who accept terrible responsibilities to protect innocence. The difference is the nature of the threat they face. The award validated Gregory's risk-taking. At 60, when most actors settle into comfortable typecasting, he had challenged audience expectations and succeeded. Industry peers recognized what Gregory had accomplished. He had proven that moral authority could survive moral complexity, that audiences trusted him enough to follow him into the darkest corners of paternal responsibility. The Omen's success also influenced Gregory's subsequent career choices. He became more willing to take roles that challenged his screen persona, understanding that audiences appreciated complexity over simplicity. Gregory showed that good actors can play morally ambiguous characters without becoming ambiguous themselves, director Richard Donner observed. Robert Thorne's actions feel justified because we trust Gregory's moral judgment. Have you ever received recognition for something that initially felt like a betrayal of your principles? Discovered that challenging yourself opened doors you hadn't known existed? The Saturn Award represented more than genre recognition. It acknowledged Gregory's artistic courage in accepting a role that most actors would have rejected, and his skill in making that role emotionally credible. June 12, 2003. Gregory Peck died peacefully at his Beverly Hills home, age 87. Among his many achievements, Academy Award winner for Atticus Finch, Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient, Hollywood's moral conscience, the Omen occupied a unique position. The film proved that moral heroes could explore moral complexity without losing their essential character. That audiences were capable of accepting their most trusted actors in challenging situations. Gregory's performance as Robert Thorne influenced how subsequent actors approached morally ambiguous roles. He demonstrated that conviction and consistency mattered more than moral simplicity. The Omen also changed how Hollywood viewed the horror genre. By casting America's most respected moral authority in a supernatural thriller, the film elevated horror from exploitation to serious dramatic territory. But the film's deepest impact was philosophical. Gregory made audiences confront questions they had never wanted to consider. What would you do if love and duty became incompatible? If protecting humanity required sacrificing your beloved child? Gregory proved that the best actors can make us believe in moral paradoxes, critic Roger Ebert observed. We accept Robert Thorne's actions because Gregory's lifetime of playing principled men gives him the authority to make extreme choices feel necessary. The irony of Gregory Peck's career was that his most challenging role, the Antichrist's father, ultimately reinforced everything Atticus Finch represented. Both characters embodied paternal love so profound that it transcended conventional moral boundaries. Have you ever realized that your most controversial decisions actually revealed your deepest principles? That testing your values made them stronger rather than weaker? The Omen remains Gregory's most morally complex performance because it forced him to explore the darkest implications of paternal responsibility. Robert Thorne loved his child so completely that he was willing to destroy that child to save humanity. The man who had played America's moral conscience proved that moral courage sometimes requires the most immoral seeming actions, that love itself can demand the ultimate sacrifice. October 15th, 1975 to January 9th, 1976. The months when Gregory Peck discovered that playing the devil's father required everything he had learned about playing heaven's advocate. The role that almost killed America's moral hero, but ultimately proved that true moral authority survives any test. The performance that transformed Gregory Peck from a moral symbol into a moral philosopher. The day Atticus Finch raised daggers to kill the Antichrist, and somehow, both characters emerged stronger.